Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to our 49th annual members meeting. I'm Tyler Frakes, Membership Director. As an attendee of the members meeting, you should have all received a packet in your email yesterday. That packet includes our meeting schedule, draft financials, a list of board nominees and their bios, and our accomplishments from this past fiscal year. If you did not get that, we'll post a link to that members packet in the chat, and it is also available on our website. I'll just introduce myself. I've had the good fortune of growing up in and around the Adirondack Park for my entire life. I truly didn't recognize the beauty and the solitude of the park until I went away to college. But now I get to share the wonder of the Adirondacks with my children. They know that Dad works to protect the mountains and lakes that they get to explore and learn about. Conservationist Robert Marshall once said, "It takes an organization of spirited people who will fight for the freedom of wilderness." And each day I'm amazed by our members, their passion, and their love for the Adirondacks. Our members make our work a reality. Thank you for joining and helping protect the Adirondack Park for current and future generations. And now I'd like to introduce the rest of the council team, some of whom you'll see on today's call, and others you'll have the opportunity to see this Saturday at our annual Forever Wild Day event. That is being held at Heaven Hill Farm in Lake Placid from 10 to 2. If you haven't signed up already, we'll put a link in the chat with all the details, and we hope you can join us this Saturday. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed seeing faces both familiar and new. I'd like to give a special shout out to Janine Sherline, Director of Development, and Elizabeth Rogers, Director of Strategic Initiatives. We were fortunate for us to join our team this past year. Thank you both. And now I'd like to hand it over to our Executive Director, Rocky Aguirre, for a few words about the council's accomplishments from this past year. Take it away, Rocky.
Thanks, Ty. And I'm watching the trees whip back and forth and thunder and lightning light up at the sky. So I hope I can stay with you. I'm determined to make sure we can get through our members meeting But I do want to let folks know that the weather is pretty extreme at the moment in the greater Keene, Lake Placid area. That said, thank you, Ty. Appreciate you emceeing. I want to welcome everybody. It's great to see so many friends on the call today. One of the most impressive aspects of doing this meeting virtually has always been seeing who is joining us and from where. I've long said that our members are the foundation that we're built on, and would love to start the meeting today by just thanking each of you for your support, for your passion, for your commitment, both to the park and to the communities of the North Country, and really all that you do to make our work possible. And when I say thank you for your support, it means thank you for being ambassadors for the park and for the council in your communities. Thank you for action and advocating on behalf of Adirondack initiatives, whether through action alerts or in person at our Albany Adirondack Lobby Days. Try saying that one 5 times fast. And thank you for your ongoing financial support for our work and operations. I am very grateful for the role that each of you play in helping us continue to meet our mission and vision for this iconic landscape. On today's call, we'll share some recent wins and important updates. And while we typically frame our accomplishments from a calendar year or legislative view, I do think it's really important to point out on the cusp of our 50th anniversary that the impact of our wins, and even in some cases our losses, that they can be measured in decades or even longer. And for almost 50 years, our work has helped shape a stronger, healthier, and more ecologically and culturally diverse Adirondack Park. I think one of the ironies here is that as an environmental political advocacy organization, much of our work is behind the scenes and difficult to see. We build relationships and support coalitions. We engage key legislative decision makers across the state and down in DC. We do this on critical Adirondack policy issues, on funding needs. We keep watch to ensure that regulatory agencies are doing their jobs and that safeguards are often in place to protect the park. We have an incredible team of experts who advocate for clean air, pure water, and are fighting for some of the most ecological, sensitive wild spaces in the world, all while recognizing the world-class recreational opportunities that exist, finding new ways to uplift and empower our resilient Adirondack communities, particularly now as we're undergoing a transformational period across this region, both in terms of leadership change, challenges, technological advances, housing challenges. There's a lot going on at this particular moment. And as we look to a pivotal November election, our work has never been more essential or relevant when it comes to protecting this iconic landscape, whether it's in the halls of Albany or down in Washington, DC. I look forward to your continued support. We're going to need it. I will probably be reaching out to many of you to talk more about that. But at this point, I would like to invite Amy Privatera from our government relations team to share more specifics and cover some important highlights from our program areas.
Thank you so much, Rocky, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Privatera, Legislative Associate at the Adirondack Council. We think of the park as forever wild, but the state capitol is also wild in a much different way. Despite the expected and unexpected curveballs thrown at us at the end of the legislative session this year, the Adirondacks fared well throughout its entirety. The Adirondack Council and partners secured another $2 million in the state budget for the Survey of Climate Change and Adirondack Lake Ecosystems, also known as SCALE, which brings the total amount of funds to $4.5 million. A group of nonprofit partners and academic institutions have designed SCALE to test how climate change impacts our Adirondack waters and how these same waters can help combat climate change. This data will prove invaluable to the state in informing future policy decision-making and guiding strategic investments in combating climate change. The Council also aided in the passage of the Wildlife Crossings Act, which protects wildlife while also preventing car accidents and saving human lives. If approved by the governor, this legislation would give New York a new tool for reducing habitat fragmentation, which is extremely harmful to wildlife, particularly in the Adirondack Park. With over 5,000 miles of public roadway in the Adirondacks, we look forward to helping the New York State Department of Transportation identify locations that need infrastructure updates to make them safer for humans and wildlife alike. Additionally, if this bill is signed into law by Governor Hochul and its requirements are fulfilled, New York will be eligible for hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding. These wins, plus other legislative victories, help protect wildlife and provide critical funding for clean water and vital scientific research in the fight against climate change. A personal highlight for me this year was seeing so many students and fellow advocates and members come out for our annual lobby day this past February. It was so heartening to see record numbers of supporters travel to Albany to advocate for their Adirondack Park. It can be frightening for people to try something new, especially something like lobbying, but we had more first-time participants this year than ever before, and we all had a really great time. Meeting other people who care about our beloved park enough to dedicate their time and resources is one of the best things about working for the council. Our victories in the Capitol would not be possible without the participation of all of our amazing members and the entire council staff. We're extremely grateful. And with that, I'll hand it over to our Conservation Associate, Jess Grant.
Thank you so much, Amy. Hello, everyone. My name is Jess Grant, and I'm the Conservation Associate at the Adirondack Council. Wild places are certainly where the council thrives, and we are well poised for protecting wild spaces and wild faces for current and future generations. This year, the conservation team has been busy with that very task, weighing in on such things as the Department of Environmental Conservation's update to the state bobcat management plan to maintain or grow bobcat populations. This is an important conservation piece as the predation from bobcats on herbivores, such as deer, increases the species diversity of plants and mammals alike. We've also been engaged on the multi-step process for the 2025 updates to the State Wildlife Action Plan, commonly referred to as SWAP. An update to this plan is required every 10 years to allow New York to apply for federal funding for conserving at-risk fish and wildlife. Part of this process has required updates to the state's list of species of greatest conservation need and species of potential conservation need. The council is encouraged to see the inclusion of plants and species that have historically been in New York, but were removed due to hunting, disease, or other pressures. We have also been advocating for greater protection for species such as Atlantic salmon, beavers, wolves, and cougars, and the protection of connective corridors and waterways to allow these species to thrive. The great news is that the updates to the SWAP come at a fortuitous time. New York environmental policy has had some significant wins since the 2015 SWAP, including the realization of elements of the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, 30 by 30 legislation requiring the state to conserve 30% of its lands by 2030, and the approval of the $4.2 billion Bond Act by voters. We're beginning to see funds flow into conserving land, and that translates into preserving species. These actions will support the execution of the 2025 SWAP, and our team is diligently working to ensure that our wild spaces and friends are protected as a warming climate changes where species may call home. We can't forget, however, that wild places include not only our wildlands and wildlife, but also our waters. Who better to speak about that than Blake, our clean water advocate?
Thank you, Jess. My name is Blake Newman, and I've been the Clean Water Advocate here at the Adirondack Council for the past nearly 3 years now. During my time in this role, I've worked most closely with a few lake associations, the Racket Lake Preservation Foundation, and later the Long Lake Association and Blue Mountain Lake Association's Water Watch. Through the Headwaters campaign, a project we started with some funds from New York Sea Grant last year, we began convening these groups regularly to talk about issues their groups were facing. A year later, those groups were successful in securing funds and support during the last funding cycle for New York State's Invasive Species Grant program, creating videos showcasing the unique character of each of their respective communities and organizations, and in one case, even getting a line item added to the town budget for invasive species management. Although these victories feel small in relation to some of the large-scale policy work my colleagues are involved in, Headwaters has represented real progress and an evolution in thinking for the Racket Headwaters region. This project has marked a significant investment of time in the watershed and perhaps even more importantly, each other for the groups involved. It's critical to recognize that these communities and the waters that support them are all interconnected and will require collective action to steward them. These groups now have the tools and knowledge to pull the levers of government and advocate for a set of shared concerns and interests, especially when they work together. I recently made the difficult but exciting decision to return to school and further my education by pursuing my PhD in human geography at the University of Georgia. The study of human geography has always had a magnetic draw because it allows me to think at the intersection of the two things I find most interesting: the natural environment and people. Much of my work here at the Adirondack Council during my time as clean water advocate focused on these intersections. Obviously, many of us that work in conservation know much about the tensions created where humans are concerned in the natural environment. But in this role, I've been really fortunate to see some of the beautiful ways that communities in the Adirondacks draw inspiration from nature, how a sense of place and history creates distinct identities for these different communities, how those facets can then be used to inform a strategy for protecting those special places, and ultimately, how all this translates to real, tangible progress and policy outcomes. I consider our work in the Racket Lake watershed to be one of my greatest contributions while I was here at the council, and it gives me great joy to know it will continue in my absence. Rocky, back over to you.
Thanks, Blake. Really appreciate the work that you, Amy, and Jess are doing, and for those important updates. Blake, I particularly wanted to thank you for all that you have done. Your work really has been a shift in a new direction for the council, and it's just been fantastic to see what you've accomplished. We wish you the best, obviously, on your new academic adventure, and say hi to Uga for me in Georgia. At this point, I'd like to introduce our board chair, Sarah Collum Hatfield, who will lead us through the business portion of our time together. Sarah, I hand the reins over to you.
Thank you, Rocky. My name's Sarah Hatfield, and I have to say one of the best things about this members meeting is getting to hear from staff. I feel so spoiled having so many conversations with them throughout the year. So nice for all of you members to be able to listen to their amazing stories. Let's see, it is 4:19, and I'd like to call this annual members meeting of the Adirondack Council to order. Welcome. And hello to the Adirondack Council members and the staff who are here with us today. It has been my pleasure to serve on the council board for a remarkable, to me anyway, 18 years, and I am delighted to be here with you today. Members like yourselves have come together to weigh in on decisions about the council's future and to advance our mission of ensuring the ecological integrity and wild character of the Adirondack Park for 49 years. Next year, we celebrate 50 years of this important work. It's a tremendous milestone. Thank you. As you will see in your members' packet, we have accomplished great things over the past year, fighting together for the protection of pristine Adirondack waters, combating invasive species, for the protection of pristine Adirondack waters, and working to reduce the chemicals applied to our road and waterways. We have advocated to restore and increase funds that support open space preservation, mitigate climate impacts, and inspire the next generation of environmental conservation leaders. The list of accomplishments is long, and we are fortunate to have a talented, passionate, and dedicated Adirondack Council team to launch us into the next 50 years. We recognize with deep appreciation members like you who have played a vital role in advancing our mission and safeguarding the Adirondack Park for future generations. Like the natural systems we aim to preserve, there is an ecosystem of collaborators and members that have helped support the council's work for nearly 5 decades. We invite you to join us in celebrating our milestone anniversary in the coming year at events and online. We hope you'll mark your calendars and keep an eye on your inboxes for the 50th anniversary celebration. At this time, I'd like to pass the microphone to Douglas Schultz, Treasurer, to present the fiscal year 23-24 financial report.
Hi, everyone. I'm Douglas Schultz, Treasurer and Chair of the Finance Committee. I'll be presenting the fiscal year 23-24 financial summary. I'm happy to report the council's finances remain strong for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 24, with $10.7 million in assets on the balance sheet versus $10 million last year at this time. In fiscal year 24, there were 2.4 million in funds available from donors and members, the Forever Wild Fund, and other miscellaneous income, plus 261,000 in bequests and gifts to the Forever Wild Fund. This supported the council's program and conservation advocacy work. These numbers are preliminary and have not yet been audited. This compares to 3 million donated last fiscal year for annual program funding. Expenses for the year ending June 30th are projected to be 2.8 million, approximately 100,000 less than last year, as a result of careful expense control by management and the board adopting a conservative budget. The council expects to end the year with 680,000 in operating cash. The council's Forever Wild Fund stands at 9.5 million, up from 8.5 million on June 30th, 23. New gifts to the fund total 261,000, including 237,000 in realized bequests. The Adirondack Council and the Adirondack Park are very fortunate to be the recipients of such generous support from so many. Thank you to all. In conclusion, I'm excited about the prospects for our fundraising efforts as planning begins for our 50th anniversary celebration in 2025. I'm convinced that our mission and messaging resonates strongly with park users and visitors, as well as our vision for the next 30 years and for generations to come. That does it for the financial report. If there are any questions from our members, please post them in the Zoom chat. I'll just give it a second. All right, I don't see any questions, so I move to accept the fiscal year 23-24 financial report and the minutes of the July 12th, 2023 virtual members meeting.
Having a quorum, thank you, Douglas Schultz, and thank you, Ann Carmel, for the second. Please launch the poll so the attendees present can vote. Do we have the results? Excellent, and the ayes have it. Thank you so much for your vote. Let's see, one of the other very important things we get to do at the members meeting is acknowledge outgoing board members. Per the Adirondack Council bylaws, board members may serve up to three-year terms before being required to rotate off the board. It's an honor to note the following board members have collectively served 47 years. Please join me in applauding these retired members: Georgina Coleman, Bill Forlenza, and Brian Reuter. Thank you. Now, I'd like to call on Ann Carmel, a member of our Board Governance and Development Committee, to present and to move motion to approve the election of this year's candidates.
Hi, good afternoon. One of the great strengths of the Adirondack Council is our board of directors. Each year we elect roughly 1/3 of our board of directors for a term of 3 years. Today, the Board Governance and Development Committee is confirming the election of 5 new directors to the board and the re-election of 3 directors whose terms were expiring. In keeping with the committee's recommendations and the vote to the membership of the Adirondack Council, I'm confirming the slate for election and re-election to the board. For re-election to a second term, Diane Fish, McKaylee Glennon, Noah Shaw, and for election to a first term, Etienne Boileau, Ellen Crayley, Martha McGregor, Karen Mincer, and Karen Salmon. Serving an officer term are Sarah Hatfield and Ethan Winter. all for 3-year terms, except those elected to an officer term where they will serve for 1 additional year of service is permitted under our bylaws. Brief bios of our exciting slate of directors was sent earlier in the members' packet. Please refer to those documents should you like to learn more about the slate. That concludes the report of the Board Governance and Development Committee. I move to accept the fiscal year 25 slate of directors.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne, for the motion to approve the candidates. Seconded by Douglas Schultz. Nicole, please launch the poll so attendees present are able to share their.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to hop on here. It seems like we're having some issues with power, so if you can just bear with us, that would be great. Thank you.
Rocky, do you want to jump to the Q&A?
Yeah, Tyler, I apologize for that. We've got a number of sort of small power outages affecting different staff in the webinar. It's, you know, we like to make things a little bit challenging when it comes to weather and Adirondack Council events, it seems like. So why don't we jump into that? I did notice that there was a question that was in the Q&A, and we can come back to that. And it was from Phil Stevens about why should the council maintain such a large balance, and I believe that was in relationship to our Forever Wild fund. That fund was created essentially as a semi endowment that would allow the council to have secure operating funds, but also the opportunity to engage in larger lawsuits when necessary. It's something that has been the backbone of our endowment and sort of a core piece of our operating. We pull a percentage off of that to help with operating costs, but largely it's left to roll over and to grow. And it's specifically to allow us to have the opportunity to engage in more challenging spaces, particularly lawsuits if necessary. So it's not an endowment per se, but functions as a semi-endowment in that sense. So happy to follow up, and I recognize that this isn't where that question was framed, but happy to answer more if necessary down the line. So
Thanks, Rocky. And just wanted to acknowledge that the nominations did pass. So thank you, everyone, for your votes. And I just want to give a thank you to both Sarah, Douglas, and Anne, and the entire board for their service to the council. And now we'll take a few questions from Rocky, who just completed his first year as executive director. And joining him will be Jackie Bowen, our director of conservation, and Kevin Schlatt, our director of government. And at this time, I encourage you to post any questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And as we wait, Rocky, can you just help explain what the council does to support the communities of the Adirondacks?
Yeah, Ty, what a good question. And I think it's one of the things where we get asked that quite a lot. And I think to state the obvious, we don't buy or protect open space. We don't work to secure conservation easements. We don't replace culverts. We don't improve wetlands. And I think the closest we've come to a habitat improvement project was helping to put siding on a former coworker's house a few years ago. We exist as political advocates. And in the advocacy space, we are the ones who bring the most pressing issues to Albany, funding requests to Albany, and worked within the legislative and governor's office to seek changes, to bring a voice for the region. We have 130,000 year-round residents. There's more votes than that in a couple of blocks in one of the boroughs downstate. So we really work in those places where it's often hard to define the outcomes. And that's one of the things we're really working to engage more around, finding real outcomes specifically around community issues. A couple of quick examples of how this takes shape for us. You know, we've worked for almost 20 years to make road salt a priority for the state, about fixing road salt pollution in particular. And it's not just about getting the state to fund and actualize recommendations from their recent road salt report, but providing real solutions to homeowners who can't drink out of their faucet, have to replace their washing machine every year, who have to, pay for breaks seasonally. We're on the real cusp of seeing action on road salt, and that's been a part of the advocacy work that we have done for the greater part of 20 years, and much more recently in coalition with other partners to push decision makers to take action. Housing, another one of the biggest challenges facing our communities regionally. This past year, I sat on the North Country Regional Economic Development Council's subcommittee on housing, and it was really to lend technical support on the options that communities can take when navigating the APA, the unique regulatory restrictions that impact the North Country, particularly the Adirondacks, the Blue Line. That's the space that we really can push and bring technical expertise to decision makers to see real movement. We're also looking at the nexus between conservation and housing, and finding strategies there where we can help support land and affordable housing, workforce housing advocates, to find options there to build in suitable places and protect open space. I could go on about prison amendments, where we really just worked with the town of Mariah to really try and get the Mariah Shock Facility, which is a mothballed prison, to be seen as part of a program by the state that would allow for training hubs, economic hubs, housing hubs, to see some of the mothballed prisons across the region, not just inside the Blue Line, as opportunities for state investment or private investment, depending on the options. I talk about micro grants and farming. We could talk about some of the work we've done getting water infrastructure funding caps lifted and getting impaired water bodies included on lists that would help with long-term funding. But all of those things are macro, and they tend to come down, and we're working on ways to sort of make those more tangible. And clean water infrastructure work, where are those projects that we can really see something? Ty, hope that wasn't too much in the weeds, but that's the space we're in. So,
all right, thanks, Rocky. Please, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. Kevin, while we're waiting, you make the sausage in Albany. You take all the ingredients and make legislation happen. Can you tell us about the biggest legislative priorities for this upcoming year?
I'll try, Tyler. Absolutely. I guess, the first thing I want to say about that, though, is, and I cannot impress this enough upon the people watching today, is that important decisions are made in Albany each and every year that have a direct bearing on the future of our Adirondack Park. And the Adirondack Council is ever vigilant, monitoring Albany for any threats or opportunities that face our Adirondack Park. That being said, we are proactive in our advocacy, and the governor and the elected members of the state legislature know that we'll be advocating for a list of important priorities in the coming year. Just a few examples, there will be many others. We'll be advocating for a full slate of new and returning board members to the Adirondack Park Agency with diverse backgrounds and experiences. We'll also be advocating for policies and funding that implement recommendations from the Adirondack Park Road Salt Reduction Task Force report, which was approved thanks to the advocacy of the Adirondack Council and partners. We'll be championing core conservation funding, the Environmental Protection Fund, the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. Those are critical to communities like ours in the Adirondacks. There are plenty of policy measures that would help advance the Adirondack Council's Vision 2050 report, such as the Public Water Data Act, which would establish a central clearinghouse for clean water data in the state that's accessible to the general public. But last thing I'll say on this is it's a long time between now and the beginning of next legislative session. I'm sure something else will come up.
Well, thanks for that response, Kevin. It's not an easy job you have managing a whole bunch of people and educating legislators and the public. So thank you.
Mhm.
Jackie, you live in the Adirondack Park. You see the threats every day, whether it be to our waters and our forests. What do you think the most imminent threats are to the park?
Yeah, Ty, that's a really good question. I can't answer this question without mentioning the big double C, which is climate change, right? That's a huge umbrella for different things. That includes carbon sequestration, emissions reduction, biodiversity protection, habitat protection, so many different pieces. But it really is the premier threat for the Adirondack region, for New York, and globally, right? This is an issue that everyone is facing. But when I look out my window right now and see this severe rain event occurring, this is not anything that's abnormal compared to last year. We saw a major storm pass through and, had devastating impacts on the 5 town regions within Indian Lake. And it's something that we know for New York State, based off of different climate science, it's only going to continue to get worse. We're going to see more severe rain events happening. We're going to see our our winters diminishing, getting warmer, less snowpack, and that's going to have cascading ecological impacts, cultural impacts to the way of life here in the Adirondacks. That means less ice fishing. It means brook trout are going to be impacted because their cold water refugia is warming up. But it's also the other things that we see. There's impacts to forest composition because of the movement of harmful non-native species coming into Adirondacks. Hemlock woolly adelgid was found in 2017 down in the Lake George region. It requires cold temperatures in order to kill that off. We're not seeing those temperatures circulating through as much anymore. So we're just seeing increasing threats in that sense. And so there is a good collective effort happening at the state level. Jess Grant earlier made mention of a lot of really great policy changes that we're seeing coming out of the state level, which really gives us a lot of hope. And through the Bond Act, we're really hoping to see more investment in clean water infrastructure, dam upgrades, or removal, so that as we have these more severe rain events, our infrastructure can be responsive to those elements, but also used to purchase riparian corridor areas or areas along rivers so that water has somewhere to go. But I would say that what it brings us back to here at the council is our Vision 2050 report, which is essentially outlines how do we fulfill the promise of the Adirondack Park, and also making sure that we are thinking through holistically about what that protection looks like. I won't spend time going to that now, but if you want to take a look at our website, Vision 2050 report is a really good tool to look at. My last piece that I will say is the recent Supreme Court decisions and the politicization of the judicial system is something that is a threat to environmental advocacy across the nation right now. With the Supreme Court decision around EPA no longer able to enforce the good neighbor rule, which has to do with pollution from coal-fired power plants, as well as the rollback of Chevron deference, which essentially gives agencies at every level the ability to interpret their own laws and regulations because they are the subject matter experts. that is now being given back to the courts to make those decisions. And so the rules are being rewritten for environmental advocacy, for public health. And so we really can't underscore the value of stewards, the next generation of stewards stepping into this space with us to ensure that we can protect one of the most globally significant regions across the world, the Adirondacks. All right, thanks, Ty.
Thanks, Jackie. Kevin, we have a question in the chat that you might be able to answer. It's from Chris and Cindy Berger. How was the council involved in advocating for New York heat?
We support a lot of ongoing efforts to combat climate change. New York heat was one of those hot end of session topics that the environmental community was watching closely to see whether or not that would get done. I would actually refer to another topic that was very hot, a hot button issue at the end of session called congestion pricing. And for folks that aren't aware, the governor decided to halt the advancement of a new program called congestion pricing, which, if enacted, it would have charged vehicles a toll for entering the island of Manhattan south of 60th Street. That toll was projected to raise $1 billion in revenue for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, arguably to promote more climate and rider-friendly transportation alternatives. And elected officials, depending on the location they represent, have taken very different views on this policy proposal. Like most decisions around policy and funding, there are winners and there are losers. And this means that in this instance, legislators did not take positions that fall along party lines. When that happened, the mental bandwidth of our legislative body was consumed with trying to find a path forward that fights climate change and makes public transit more affordable. So all this is to say, ultimately, everyone went home without a solution when session ended in June. They didn't find a solution on New York heat, they didn't find a solution on congestion pricing, and there were a lot of priorities from the Adirondacks that were not tended to as well. So I just present congestion pricing as an example of there are just certain things that we can't control or that we can't anticipate, that even though we do everything else we can to try and get a policy objective completed, there are just these things, that these curveballs that get thrown at us that are sometimes, unfortunately, the reason certain things don't get done.
Thanks, Kevin. You certainly have a hard job down in Albany.
Privilege, though.
Well, if you have any additional questions that we're unable to answer today, or you think of later, please just send us an email, and we'd be happy to answer at another time. I just want to thank all of our members for their energy, passion, and care for this national treasure. Thank you, Kevin, Rocky, and Jackie. And now I'll recognize a few of our individuals, or an individual and an organization in which we are honoring at this year's Forever Wild Day. The first, we are giving a special recognition award to Benita La Jiao. She is a dedicated activist for environmental and social justice issues. She has had a more than 30-year career as a New York State licensed public health nutritionist and dietitian. And she has worked in the environmental space to increase access to and promote environmental stewardship in the Adirondacks and beyond. In 2022, she was appointed by Governor Kathy Hochul to the Adirondack Park Agency Board, where she has brought her state agency, recreation, and environmental experience to the complex issues that come before the Adirondack Park Agency. We look forward to recognizing the great contributions of Benita. And our 2024 Conservationist of the Year, the Northeast Wilderness Trust. They have been steadily working to protect and restore Northeast wildlands through land conservation and open space protection. Just recently, in the last year, Newt has successfully added key parcels in the Adirondack Park to part of its protected portfolio, what they like to call Forever Wild. From the Five Ponds Wilderness to the Champlain Valley, Newt has worked tirelessly to increase permanent wilderness protection on private lands across the Adirondack region. We look forward to saluting the entire organization for their work in preserving the ecological integrity and wild character of these key properties across the Northeast. Both will have brief remarks at Forever Wild Day, and we look forward to hearing from both Benita and representatives from the Northeast Wilderness Trust. And now I'll pass it back to Rocky and Sarah for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Ty. I appreciate your emceeing. Appreciate everybody's flexibility. Some of this is a little ginky as we work through some of the weather. I did see that there was one question. So Sarah, before we jump to closing this out, I really do think it's important. This is the chance for the members to be engaged, to ask questions. And I would rather go a little off script to make sure that we get those questions in. So Phil, I saw you had asked, are there any legal implications of council policies, and does the council maintain an attorney? We don't have a specific attorney that represents us, as we have a number of firms that we work with. And part of that is because we engage in multiple complex areas, both constitutional law, real estate law. I mean, we need a host of the best attorneys across the region, down in Albany, to be available to help provide legal input on the policies and the legislative pieces, the legislative work that we engage in. So there are often significant legal implications, whether it's, APA jurisdictional rulings, whether it's lawsuits. This is one of the spaces that the council actively engages in and participates in. And we do have a host of lawyers and legal staff that we work with. We don't have a lawyer on staff per se, but I feel like talk to enough lawyers in different firms that it feels like it often. So I hope that answers your question, and I'm glad we could get that one in. I just, it's one way of just saying thank you both to the members who participate. If you're going to make time to be on this, I really do feel it's important for us to make sure we have a chance to engage with you directly. So much of this is us trying to make sure we get all of these points in. The best parts of these member meetings are often having the chance to interact and engage with members directly. So as we wrap up and head to thank yous, I really want to thank the board, both who are on as presenters. I saw a number of board that are part of just a part of attending. I saw a lot of board members emeriti, former board members. I saw a number of names on there of people that I hope will be board members someday in the future. So just like to thank all of you for showing interest and for being here and for being engaged. I want to thank our staff, especially those that are working behind the scenes to make this event run so smoothly, especially Assistant Director of Development, Nicole Gotham, and Conservation Associate, Jess Grant. And finally, I really like to just thank each of you for participating tonight. It really is essential, and it's essential to our organizational due diligence. Your support of the council is essential. We literally couldn't do our work without it. And it's not just the financial support, it's really the space that many of you play in keeping our entire region's nonprofits and community services healthy and functioning. You really are critical in so many ways to so many people. I just want to acknowledge all of you and thank you for that larger role that many of you play as well. And with that, we made it through the thunderstorms. It looks like the power has stopped flickering. So we have survived. And with that, I will pass it back to Sarah to help close out the meeting. Sarah?
Thank you, Rocky. When we were preparing for this meeting, we kept on reminding ourselves that this isn't something we do all the time. And it was okay if there were glitches. I have to admit, the last thing I expected was to lose power. It's sunny in New Jersey, but the wind is blowing. So for as long as I'm with you today, I just want to say thank you very much. The vote to approve the slate of new board candidates has passed. Thank you for your vote. Thank you for your participation today. A tremendous thank you to the staff for what you do every day and for everything you've done to put this together. This meeting is now adjourned, I hope to see many of you on Saturday at Heaven Hill Farm in Lake Placid. Thank you for your support of the Adirondack Council, and thank you for being stewards of the Adirondack Park. Happy hiking.